Hello YouTube, this is Dakota from Bowtied Media, and today we've got a brand new installment of the Hot Take series where I ask your opinions on things and give me your hot takes on stuff. And this episode we are specifically looking at the best of lists. I made a couple year-end review lists, the best songs, albums, and EPs of 2024, and even though I thought the lists were pretty good, some of you guys did not, so let's check them out. Rejaded by Deadmau5 is not only the best song of 2024 by an enormous margin, but one of the two best songs released in the last 10 years. Is the other song Jaded? Is it Jaded and Rejaded? Is that what you're saying? Yeah, I enjoyed Rejaded quite a bit. I don't think it's a bad song by any means. In fact, I think it's a song that does deserve a lot of recognition, but a list can only be 10, and I didn't want to fill it up with a ton of honorable mentions, and so yeah, I have a general top list of things for sure, and so that one just didn't end up making my final list. I don't think it's a bad song by any means. I think it's quite fantastic. I think it's one of Deadmau5's best songs in quite a while, I would say, but one that just didn't quite make the top 10 for me. It doesn't make it a bad song, but also, really, you think this is one of the best of the last, years, 10 years? I don't know about that. It's a great track, but even within the last 10 years, I don't even think it's Deadmau5's best song in the last 10 years. True Magic, easily the dance LP of the year, deserved higher than an honorable mention. Yeah, you know what? Yes, I obviously very, very much enjoyed the album by Salute of True Magic, so much so that I put it in my honorable mentions, not quite in my top 10. I think that one was actually my second or third runner-up. Technically, it would have been 12 or 13 on my list. I like the album, obviously, a lot. It's in my honorable mentions. A dance album of the year? I don't know about that. I feel you. I get what you're saying in terms of this disco, maybe speed garage stuff. I definitely think it's definitely up there. I do love the style. I love the tone. I love the just shimmer of the whole record. But yeah, just one that I don't think quite had enough maybe star power, all things considered, like a kind of Brat did. And one that I also think is also a little underrated. I don't think I saw a ton of people talk about that album in particular. And so that maybe does influence maybe subconsciously just a little bit where the things land on my list because I am a content creator, and so my lists are obviously my own lists, but they have to have a little bit of spice to them in some capacity, and they have to have a little bit of people got to know what I'm talking about, I guess, to some extent. But yeah, I like Salute obviously a lot, and I think the record is fantastic, just not top 10. Beast Boys, WINGZ and FANGZ was my album of the year. The two discs were really unique, and even though the FANGZ side didn't land for most, I loved nearly every song. Yeah, another good one that I think would have landed if I had maybe some more extended honorable mentions. This would have been here, Beast Boys, WINGZ, and FANGZ. But yes, very much to your point here, because it was a double-sided, WINGZ being a little bit more of a melodic side, and FANGZ being a little bit more of a rigid, abrasive, heavier, more practically kind of rhythm side of the stuff. Yeah, I didn't mind FANGZ, but I thought maybe it was not Beast Boy's strongest part of the record, and so I think if the whole record for me was like a WINGZ side, I think maybe it at least lands honorable mentions, but that more abrasive side just isn't necessarily for me, which is why I actually really appreciated that it was a two-sided album. I do really like that he kind of split up between this more brighter and the darker side of things, but in the end, again, I think it's a fantastic record. I think it's great, just not enough, I think, to land in the top 10 for me. I loved both Vylet Pony's albums to death, but Girls Who Are Wizards was my album of 2024 with flying colors. Truly one of the most euphoric albums ever made, and it really got me back into EDM after my initial Monstercat phase ended in 2018. 3 out of the 5 of my top 5 songs of the year are on that album, and The Story of DJ Goober is my top 5 of all time. Yes, another fantastic album that was in my honorable mentions did not make it to the list. And this one I wanted to talk about more than anything because it's a bit of an oddball branding-wise of Vylet Pony, and Vylet Pony also releases a ton of records. But yes, you kind of hit it on the head there. If you are a big Monstercat fan and call yourself a Monstercat fan that maybe doesn't branch out a ton, I do think Vylet Pony's Girls Who Are Wizards is a fantastic album for you. I think it does a great job of sort of encompassing this classic old school dubstep sound while still making it feel quite modernized, and one that I just think, yeah, did a great job holistically as a record through and through, but just one that, again, I think it maybe had a lot going on, maybe too much for me to have not landed in my top 10, but more so than anything, I wanted to say this because if you're a Monstercat fan and haven't listened to, or at least an older Monstercat fan and haven't listened to Girls Who Are Wizards, go do it. It's a fantastic record. I think you'll really enjoy it. Everything You've Ever Seen should have made it to the top 10 easily. One of the most ethereal albums I've heard in the EDM space and an incredible debut. Again, another one that just was on the honorable mentions, but not quite, the Chet Porter debut record. And this one, I'm not gonna lie, this was the 11th one. This album, I literally was determining if I wanted to put this one, even A Cloudy Sky, I think might have been 12 technically for me when I had to whittle down the list. And this one just didn't quite make the cut. And that's primarily because I think it just got a little, I hate to say it, just a little kind of boring comparatively to the other records. I think it's fantastic. I think if also you're a fan of Porter Robinson's Nurture album, I think this has a lot of influence and is actually probably one of the closest just albums in general to that one of Porter, because there's not a lot at all that sound like Nurture. But I think more often than not, when I was listening through and playing through all these albums a ton at the end of the year, I just found myself maybe even like skipping through some of the songs a little bit more than some of the other tracks were, and I just felt it maybe landed a little bit softer than I expected it to. That was an album that I thought was going to land in my top 10, but just ended up not a little bit. But again, fantastic record. If you like Nurture, go listen to it. But yeah, I just didn't quite land there. Surprised Pyroclastic wasn't in the top 10 songs. Yeah, this is one that I think for sure could have landed on the list, but this is one that I have a personal sort of rule where I don't like to add a ton of artists on there multiple times, and so I have a one song per artist rule. But yes, that could have been a Chime song because it's Chime and Skybreak ended up being it for the one with Keepsake with Comet. But this one in the end, to me, I think I comparatively put this, it was either Comet or Pyroclastic for me, and Comet just felt like a better representation of my journey, I think, as a music listener, where we currently are at in the space. And I actually really like that it was an NCS release. I think maybe sometimes I don't give enough credit or love to NCS tracks, and I think that was just an absolute all-star one. Again, I said it in the video, I think that's my favorite NCS release of all time. And so as much as I really, really liked Pyroclastic, I think Comet just felt like a more well-rounded, a better packaged song than Pyroclastic was, because Pyroclastic does have that bit of fun energy, kind of volcanic, just grumble video game sounds to it. And it was very, very quite playful, but I think as a song that I want to listen to time and time and time again, that I think will have a more long-lasting history with my just in my listening habits, I think it's got to go to Comet. I think Get Off the Internet is really good and should have been top 10 best albums. Yes, this is the one that I heard the most about in feedback, was that Eliminates, Get Off the Internet, and or the 404 Redux should have been in my lists, or at least an honorable mention. And this is, I wouldn't necessarily a hot take here. This is kind of a boring take, which feels bad for me, and this is a hot takes video, but like, I liked the album, but just like not a ton. I think this one had a lot of just like solid, like 7 or 8 out of 10 songs for me personally. And I don't love rating everything all the time, but I guess that sort of is my channel. But that was one where I really liked all the songs, but I didn't feel like there was any individual standouts. I didn't think there was any bad songs really on the album either, but I just think holistically when there were songs I really wanted to go back to and listen to across all of the albums that I was kind of going for that had in my final lists, I didn't find myself coming back to the Eliminate one as much as I maybe expected to. I remember listening to it at first. I think at the gym when I did my first listening of it, and I was like, oh damn, like I was like, this is really good. I really liked it. I like SMSOU a lot too, but when it kind of got onto the back burner of the stuff and things kind of came on, I never really went back to it a ton as I maybe wanted to, or maybe that it deserved. But again, I think it's fantastic. I think Nate did a great job. But that was just one for me that was like, no, that one I don't think should have landed in the top 10 for me personally. And I just don't think, I think objectively, I think there's just stronger records out there. I think 2024 had a great year, and I think Eliminate had a great album, but I think there were just better ones out there. Talos should have been an honorable mention. I was surprised myself to find out that 90% of the track list hit the mark for me. Yes, the next biggest hot takes on this list is that Talos should have been there. Zedd's kind of comeback record, Talos. And this is one that I really did enjoy. Again, another album that I think was great. I think the songs are fantastic. Tangerine Rays even landed on my best songs of the year. But I just think overall the record was a little messy, messier than some of his last two, I should say. The lead single, Out of Time, that you guys talk about a lot, I just think the mixing was pretty poor and the structure didn't really land land a ton, and I think I'm not in the minority opinion on that one. And I just think there are some good songs, but it just felt like a kind of an odd mixture of a record that I found myself skipping through some songs. I like Sona kind of conceptually, but I just don't really get it in the track list and the runtime. I don't get the end. I don't get 1685 with just the weird kind of end outro that's supposed to be this like hidden Easter egg at the very end. I just didn't. It didn't land for me. I didn't really get it. And I think when it comes to top lists like these, where you need to have like everything needs to be dialed in, it needs to be like it just needs to be top line for to land on my top 10 list. It just didn't. Temanite's Stardust in the Universe should have been in the top 10. Yeah, that one, again, I think is a great song. I think it's fantastic. It landed even in my standouts category from This Week in EDM, and that was one that was cut from the honorable mentions later on into the list because I thought there were so many great songs out there. And I do think it's Temanite's best song probably of all time. But for me, this is maybe more of a replayability one where I did really enjoy it, obviously, but I just didn't find myself really going back to it a whole ton. And even though I think there are some songs on the list that I definitely don't think I go back to as much as some other tracks, I just think in the grand scheme of things, it kind of felt like a weird middle ground where it didn't quite have it all for me, but also didn't quite feel like it was like a big enough, I don't know if star power is the right word, but it landed well and it landed great. And I thought the song was fantastic. But in the end, I was just like, I didn't feel like it needed to land on the top 10 list. It didn't feel like it was even an honorable mention where it was just like, this is a great song, one of his best, but it just kind of was. I think Russian Roulette belongs in top 10, and Stars from the Jaren album is better than Icarus. Okay, first of all, Russian Roulette. Yes, I give myself a one song per artist list or caveat, and so I do think holistically Cheerleader is a stronger song than Russian Roulette. I think Russian Roulette is a close second in terms of specifically the EDM style from Porter here. I think Easier to Love You is actually my favorite song from the album, but in terms of a specifically more EDM style that has that kind of tone to it, Cheerleader and Russian Roulette are definitely those 1-2 combo. But I think holistically, Cheerleader just did a better job of fully encompassing the year for Porter Robinson. I think it had more commercial value too. It had just more commercial leaning audience and was a bit more of a song that holistically I think best represented the Smile era for Porter than Russian Roulette did. And so it's not to say Russian Roulette, again, is not a bad song by any means. I think it's fantastic. I just think if we're going to look at one song that would represent the whole album of Smile, it's got to be Cheerleader. And the second part of that, of saying that Stars is actually better than Icarus, is something very interesting because I was heavily debating putting Stars over Icarus. It's the last two songs on Jaren's Light Years album, and I was so close. I was listening to the two back to back for pretty much the whole week leading up to the list of just being like, which one's gonna make it? Which one's gonna make it? And I think I had to land with Icarus for kind of the same reason that Cheerleader did, because I just think it did a better job of fully encompassing what Light Years was as an album, even though I didn't talk about the album holistically. But I just think it was a better song in terms of representation and what it was trying to accomplish. And I also think the narrative is stronger on Icarus than it was on Stars. Progressive House deserves at least one song in the top 10 every year. There's a reason it has by far the largest population of dedicated listeners of any EDM subgenre. It's one of the best genres of all time. While its average quality has declined, the peaks are still sky high. The trends have changed, but what remains constant is the extraordinary quality of the peaks of Progressive House each year, and has arguably the biggest staple subgenre of EDM. It deserves a spot. This is a very interesting one, and this is probably one of the hottest takes of this video that I wanted to talk about, because I disagree with you. I don't think a genre in particular should have a spot, should have a dedicated spot. I don't think you go 1 through 10 and you go, okay, house needs some representation, okay, and dubstep needs some representation, oh, and future bass, and like new disco, and like melodic dubstep. I don't think they do that. I don't think they should, because that kind of undermines the value of a top 10 list for me personally, where you have just whatever does best this year. And personally, I saw a lot of people talk about techno and progressive house and how none of those really landed on any of my lists this year. I think it was a pretty weak year for progressive house and techno. I hear lots of stuff about the Casbo record, the Sultan and Shepherd, even like Lane 8's Deep House one. And I thought they were great records, but I don't think we nearly had like as sky high of a year as 2024 for progressive house and or techno. I don't argue that progressive house is the biggest subgenre out there, but if I just think of a really high, like just way up there song that was greater than anything else this year in progressive house, nothing comes to mind, honestly. I can't think of anything individually off the Sultan Shepherd or off of even Casbo. Again, Lane 8. Like, I didn't really feel like there was one song in particular that was that great. If anything, I thought the last song from Stealing Fire from Virtual Riot's record was actually the best, like, sort of house song of the year. And so that one, yeah, as much as I understand the sentiment of there should be some house on here, I just think house had not a great year. And finally, the Marcix EP not being mentioned in any capacity is the biggest snub of your best of video. Yes, that is the one I heard, at least for sure, for the EP's video, the Marcix Digital Reassurance. And yeah, this was one for me that I just didn't really resonate with a ton that you guys did. It was one that I listened to through pretty blind. Sometimes I go into listening experiences blind, and sometimes I can't necessarily because people say like, oh, this is fantastic, or I see scores on it from albumoftheyear.org, which I frequent daily. But that was one that I went into very, very blind, and I came out of it and I was like, oh, that's like a pretty good record, a pretty good EP. I'm fine with this. And then I saw the scores and it was like, this is the greatest EP of the year. And I was like, whoa. I was like, really? And so I did even a double and even I think third full listen before I even gave it a proper score, and was like, no, I just don't see what's so fantastic about this one over anything else. So maybe this is just a major snub, and maybe I just didn't get this Marcix record. But yeah, I didn't really think anything too crazy about this one way or another. But those have been your hot takes about my lists. Let me know what you think of any of these hot takes, if you agree with them, if you don't agree with them. And yeah, I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say in the comment section below. But other than that, I'm Dakota from Bowtied Media, and I'll see you guys in another video.